Hi, and welcome to Stay Strong. A young man posted a picture of himself on social media. A few minutes later, he checked his post to see if anyone liked it. There was none. After an hour, he went back once again and checked his post. There was nothing. He did this several times until he went ahead and liked his own post. Although it may sound humorous, but how many of us are like this young man seeking validation and approval from others? Seeking approval from people is as old as man. We were created by a triune God for community. But due to disobedience and the fall of mankind, instead of living in a community and worshipping God, instead we are seeking approval from people and worshipping them instead of God. So how can we shy away from seeking the approval from people? Well, here are 3 questions we can ask ourselves. The first question is, whose applause am I seeking? The Apostle Paul writes to the church in Galatia according to Galatians chapter 1 verse 10, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. What Paul is saying here is, whose applause we seek is whom we serve. If we serve man, we seek man's applause. If we serve God, we seek God's applause. We have to make a distinct choice of whom we serve because, after all, we cannot serve 2 masters, both God and man. Most often, our excessive love for praise from man stems from our belief that man's opinion of us is far more significant than God's opinion of us. But the fact is that they too seek approval and recognition because they are human and fallible just like any of us. So whose applause are you seeking? Is it God or man? The second question we need to ask ourselves is, who examines my heart? In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, Paul tells the church in Thessalonica, just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, so we speak not to please people, but rather God who examines our hearts. Have you, with good intentions, posted a comment on social media that was rebuffed? Or have you published a post with genuine sincerity and someone shot it down? It can happen to any one of us. The reason being is that people do not see the motive of our hearts. Their response is subjective and based on their opinion of what they think, and they judge us according to their standards. It can be liberating for us to know that God examines our motives. He searches us. He weighs our motives and our hearts. He is the only one who can see our intentions, and therefore we must please Him and not people. So the question you need to ask is, who examines my heart? So the first question is, whose applause am I seeking? The second question is, who examines my heart? And the third question we need to ask ourselves is, whose glory am I seeking? In Paul's letter to the church in Corinth, in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 31, he writes, so whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Sometimes our motive to please people stems from a desire for approval, and sometimes it could be the fear of rejection, a longing to be looked up to, or a desire to fit into a group. And to achieve these, we could invariably resort to wrong methods. So whether it's our motive or our methods, if you note, the central focus is ourselves. But the Bible tells us that whatever we do, which includes our day-to-day living, we ought to do it for the glory of God and not for ourselves or for others. In Matthew chapter 5 verse 16, Jesus teaches His disciples, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So next time we need to ask ourselves, whose glory am I seeking? So the first question is, whose applause am I seeking? The second question is, who examines my heart? And the third question is, whose glory am I seeking? To be a God pleaser is countercultural. Jesus was countercultural. He never sought to please people. Jesus lived to glorify his Father. He spoke with truth and grace. He never shied away from telling the truth, even if it meant rejection from people, threats from his enemies, including his death at the cross. Today, you and I have a choice. Garner the likes of 1,000,000 or the likes of one person, God Himself.